The opinions of Call of Duty Black Ops 6 on the internet range from this being the best thing that's ever happened to this being the worst game that they've ever produced. And honestly, it's probably been one of the most polarizing games to date, with new features, new things going on, and core gameplay completely changing. So today, much like every other content creator on the internet, because we're all fascinatingly unique, I'm going to throw you everything that I've been thinking about Black Ops 6. Now, I honestly do feel as though this game is doing a lot right, but there are a couple of things that could be better, and also for me as somebody who's more of a Warzone player, I have to contextualize a lot of the key changes in terms of Warzone, and we definitely will be splitting the focus a little bit in the video. So I'm going to start off by talking about everything in terms of Black Ops 6, and then talk about what this means for Warzone a little bit later on. Today's video is brought to you by War Thunder. War Thunder is one of the largest and most comprehensive combat games for vehicles that's ever been made, and you can play it for free right now on PC and console. There are over 2,500 tanks, planes, and helicopters and ships of 10 major nations, ranging from as early as the 1920s to the modern-day fighter jets and battle tanks of today. Every vehicle in the game is incredibly detailed with realistic graphics, authentic sound effects that put you right in the driver's seats of all of these vehicles available in the game. War Thunder is a worldwide community of over 70 million players partaking in PvP battles throughout these various generations of vehicles. If you sign up using the link in the description below or in the pinned comment, new and returning players who haven't played in the last 6 months will receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that include multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator, the Eagle of Valor, as well as 100,000 Silver Lions and 7 days of premium account. This is a limited time offer, so act quickly on the link below. Now, let's start off with the good stuff, because honestly there is a lot there. This is the first Call of Duty that we've had in a number of years now that's actually trying to do something a little bit different. You know, we've gone from boots on the ground to jetpacks to back to boots on the ground, but nothing's really revolutionized how Call of Duty generally operates, and Omni Movement is probably the first stab that we've had in terms of movement, in terms of core gameplay functionality, since the jetpack system. And if I'm honest, the system's better than I anticipated. I thought Omni Movement was going to be really intimidating, really frustrating, and just add more layers of complex muck on top of the systems that were already there that just made it less enjoyable for every single player, both average players and people who play from post 9-to-5 jobs to super competitive players. I just didn't think it was going to help the overall structure of the game. But I've been pleasantly surprised. I think they've ultimately just created a fun and enjoyable movement system that pretty much everybody can use and everybody can get hands-on with, and if you start figuring out the intricacies of it, you can use in some pretty exciting ways. But I don't think you need to be having some sort of like COD PhD in order to just simply enjoy this new staple of the game. The movement, when combined with the gunplay, just creates what I feel to be a pretty satisfying gameplay loop, even though I'm not really somebody who's a hugely multiplayer-orientated person. I just feel like you can do cool and interesting things in this multiplayer that's going to have people playing it for longer, or at least enjoying it in different ways than they have before. I do feel like Omni Movement is a bit of a Marmite thing though, and I feel like some people are going to love it and some people are really going to dislike it, and it's probably the most polarizing shift since they moved to jetpacks, but they've tried to like make it accessible and make it less of a generational shift that something like that was. And I honestly think it's in a good spot. I know some people won't like it, but for me personally, I think it tries to do some new and interesting things with an otherwise fairly standard formula of Call of Duty. Because COD has not changed in many years. It's been pretty much the same thing now since 2019, and nothing really has shifted until this new introduction. So the movement's decent, the gunplay feels pretty good on 60Hz servers in multiplayer at least. Whether or not that stands the test of time in Warzone, we'll have to wait and see. And the game generally just feels like it's in a pretty solid place. And I say that as somebody who's not super into multiplayer. I'm definitely going to be far more interested in zombies and far more interested in Warzone. But let's talk about the things that need to be improved. A couple of things that I just feel like would take this product from being a pretty solid entry to being a pretty polished and fairly well-made entry. The first is time to kill. Time to kill in this game seems to be pretty weird. It appears as though whether you shoot somebody in the leg or the chest, the time to kill is pretty much the same, and only headshots actually give you a multiplier. And on top of that, the TTK and multiplayer just feels really, really quick. Now, I kind of know why they did that. I feel like they've done it because they've added a bunch of movement to the game, and if they prolong the time to kill too much, it would just be super hard to kill people as they were zipping around the place. And striking a balance with this is actually inherently quite difficult in terms of balance and design. But I do feel like it just needs another 5-10%, maybe 15% at best, just to make it feel like you're not dying instantaneously all the time, because that's kind of what it feels like. And especially in a game when you've added a bunch of movement to introduce a skill gap and outplayability, it just seems to make sense to me that you would want to have the time to kill be ever so slightly longer. We also have a complete nerf of aim assist in some respects, which is really promising to see. I actually think it's going to build even more of a skill gap and produce less hand-holding than we've seen in previous Call of Duties, which I think is healthier for the vast majority of players on the game. So seeing all of these things makes sense, but again, just a small TTK bump I think would be heading in the right direction. It's pretty crazy to me already that there's kind of like a meta in the beta, and the Jackal PDW is becoming this sort of universally feared thing straight away because of how quickly it kills. The next thing is audio. Now, literally as I'm recording this video, Call of Duty have tweeted that they're investigating audio prioritization issues that's resulting in lower or missing volume for some audio cues, including footsteps, explosions, and sliding. And generally, I would say the audio, up until this point, which I'm glad they're investigating in this, hasn't actually been all that great. It's been pretty muffled, kind of confusing, and positionally not phenomenal. But when there aren't a bunch of things happening in the game and you can actually hear footsteps, the positional audio has been really good. Like, you can actually pretty much see and hear clearly where people are. To me, it seems as though when there's lots of gunfire, explosions, and other things going on, it's getting lost in the audio mix, which it looks like they're hoping to address already, which is great to see. The one thing I will say about the audio is that they do have one really good thing going for it this year, which is that they've introduced a system of up and down audio, which is without a doubt the worst part of Call of Duty at the moment. Now, in the current engine, it's been basically a nightmare to tell if somebody's been above or below you most of the time because the top-down audio has not been that great. There are loads of games like, for example, Delta Force, a new title that's coming out, where it's so inherently clear if somebody is above or below you because the audio cues are distinctly different. And they've actually introduced this in Black Ops 6, and hopefully by extension it will come into the new Warzone as well, because it's very audibly clear to tell if somebody's above or below you now, and I'm really glad they finally introduced something which, honestly, probably shouldn't have taken this long to be in the game. The next thing that kind of needs a bit of addressing for me is tac sprint. I just feel like it doesn't fit into the formula anymore. Now, at the moment, you pretty much have to enable tac sprint assist in the game in order to get the game to feel fluid and run around as you kind of want to. And there's a whole video on Omni Movement that I've done if you're interested in finding out how that works. But for me personally, I think you should just have a universal sprint speed in all given directions. That's how the game feels its smoothest. Going into a tac sprint, then coming out into like a regular sprint, it all just feels kind of janky. Like, I would rather just have one universal speed for everybody who is sprinting, and if there's a set duration for how long that lasts, then sure. But generally, I just think it should just be one set speed. Having to go from multiple different animations in sprinting, especially now that you're sprinting sideways and backwards too, just feels a bit overly complex and doesn't feel like it needs to be in the game, at least. I don't know how other people feel, but for me personally, my character going from tac sprint to regular sprint to tac sprint again is actually just kind of annoying. Like, I just don't see the value it adds anymore. So I would like to see them potentially change that system just to make Omni Movement feel more fluid and more accessible. I don't think people should have to go through different menus and 75 different settings in order to make the game's movement system feel like it makes sense. I feel like they should just be able to pick up a controller or keyboard and mouse, sprint in any given direction, and be like, oh, cool, I can do that now, sweet. And that should just be how the system works. The final thing I'm going to talk about is skill-based matchmaking, because it is in the beta and it's cranked to 7,000. Now, Call of Duty have done extensive amounts of papers on this, explaining pretty much everything that is, going on, what is happening with SBMM and why they're doing it. And the answer is that it's not going to change. From their own findings, whenever they change the system, they lose more players, so SBMM isn't going to change. The only thing I feel like this game just needs to compensate for is I need to see more noticeable swings from match to match. It honestly feels as though if I have one decent game, the next 8 games are just going to be pure hellscapes against opponents who are outrageously good at the game. And I say that as somebody who has a high skill level, and that's fine. I honestly just feel like the game falsely assumes that you're going to be performing at 110% for the next 8 matches, when in reality, one game might be like a 70% performance, the next one's like a 30, and then one of them's like a 100%. I just feel like there just needs to be 10% more variance in the lobbies. The biggest fallacy I see with skill-based matchmaking is not the system itself, and in fact, I'll be honest with you, considering some of the people I've played against when SBMM isn't working, I get why the system's there. I would straight up ruin people's games, and I'm fine with it at this point. I've accepted my fate as a high-skill player. It is what it is. But I just feel as though it makes a fallacy and an assumption that the top-end players are always playing at the top-end level. They're always playing at 200%. We never get anything wrong. We never make a mistake. We never miss any shots, and because of that, we're constantly up against opponents who are of the same caliber. And I just feel like that is a general mistake that SBMM makes, and that if they scaled that back even just ever so slightly, we'd have a much more balanced system that feels like it makes more sense. Even if it's just like a 10% to 15% more variance in lobbies, it would just work. My only issue with SBMM in its current implementation, for the most part, in terms of playing people your own skill, is that when I matchmake with friends who are lower skill, I basically can't play with them, because the game will put them in my lobbies, and it will just be a bloodbath for them. And I know that is kind of a Crimea River scenario for a specifically high-caliber streamer who plays the game for endless amounts of hours, and I'm not expecting any sympathy. And I've stated in this video a couple of times that I do just fundamentally at this point accept that SBMM is a thing. It would just be nice if it thought about a few of those things, and maybe changed a few of those things. Now, finally, let's talk about Warzone. Warzone is where I'm at with this channel. It's what I love, it's what I enjoy doing, and I'll definitely be playing a lot of zombies. Multiplayer, I'll probably play a bit of. I don't think it's going to be the focus, but it's still a pretty solid outing this year. I've got to say, all of the core functionality for what we've seen in Black Ops 6 makes me really excited for the future of Warzone. I do feel as though the new directional up and down audio system, once implemented properly, the Omni Movement system and the gameplay that it can produce, and just some of the other little quality of life things like the fact that we no longer have backpacks in the game, are actually going to be phenomenal for Warzone. Like, even just getting rid of the backpack system so that we don't have 75 kill streak spams or 16 grenades being thrown at us is a monumental improvement over the last year of Warzone, where that has fundamentally been a problem. I have personally been a little bit disappointed with Warzone's content in terms of talking about Area 99 being a resurgence map, and the fact that Verdansk is coming back. Overarchingly, I think those two maps are a good content package, and I think, you know, by March, people are going to generally be happy. My personal issue with Warzone is that I just want them to do new things. Area 99 is arguably new, so they've definitely got me for that one. But, like, Verdansk isn't new, and I did want to see Avalon instead. I'm glad Verdansk is coming back, but I've wanted new things for Warzone. I really do feel as though Warzone has, like, fixed all of the things that it messed up in Modern Warfare 2, and it's like, cool, that's great and all, we love that, you know, I'm glad we're back at a place where the game feels like it's supposed to feel, but what's the next step? And it kind of feels like with Omni Movement now and some of these fun new systems that are coming to the game and improved quality of life with backpacks and audio, that we're actually taking that next step now. We're bringing the game into a new place with new gameplay, different things, different gunplay scenarios, and moving it from a system that hasn't really changed since March 2020 into a new era at the end of 2024/early 2025. I do still think there are some fundamental flaws with Warzone. The server system I've spoken on fairly extensively. Some of the alleged changes in this upcoming integration may not necessarily work out very well balancing-wise, but generally speaking, it's just good to see a shift in a new direction. Finally, we're seeing something change, and that's a good thing, I feel, especially with the introduction of Big Map Ranked again, which I'm very glad to see the return of. I feel like Omni Movement is going to breathe new life into Warzone. I feel like it's going to produce those clips that we saw from the original Warzone in March 2020. You know, when March 2020 dropped and people were doing cool things that they'd never done in large-scale Call of Duty before, it felt like we were kind of in a new position for the game. And now we have this new movement system which lets people do cinematic shit like dive off of buildings at full speed and slide backwards. And it kind of feels like maybe we're going to get those opportunities again, and get them again on a map that everybody fundamentally does love. Even though Verdansk isn't my favorite map of all time, I do have good memories from playing on it. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of Warzone with some of these new systems. I still feel like there's a lot of execution and proof in the pudding to be done here. Server systems in Warzone need working. Audio systems need to be in a polished and ready to go state by the time this game releases and the Warzone integration happens. And just generally, a lot of things need to pan in the right direction. Balancing needs to head in the right direction. It looks like they're testing some new things for the anti-cheat. That needs to head in the right direction. Because even if they are launching a game which is sort of hot and cold received in the grand scheme of things, if they can push zombies and the free-to-play Warzone element in a really good direction, I feel like this will be a good year for Call of Duty. But there's just some things that they need to nail down.
As a reminder, make sure to check out the link in the description below and pinned in the comments for the exclusive and limited time War Thunder offer that will allow you to get cosmetics and more in-game today.
Now, I'm really curious to hear you guys' thoughts and feelings about all of this, because I'm coming at this from the perspective of somebody who plays a lot of Call of Duty, ultimately is a bit of a giga sweat, and appreciates things like Omni Movement. But you guys might have radically different opinions, and I'd really love to hear them down below. So make sure you drop a comment, drop a like as well, subscribe, and I'll be interacting with all of you down in the comment section, so I'll catch you there. As always, folks, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.